Welcome back to the deep dive. This is where we take, these huge stacks of information, books, articles, all that research, and we really just boil it all down. We find those essential, actionable insights that you actually need to know. And today, we are tackling a challenge that is, it's as old as human ambition itself. It's that moment you want to just throw in the towel. It's a battle, but it's not fought on a field. It's all in the mind. So we're doing a deep dive into the science and, maybe more importantly, the enduring philosophy of perseverance, of mental strength. Our source material for this whole analysis it's focused entirely on one motivational powerhouse. It's John Mason's book, Never Give Up, You're Stronger Than You Think. It's pretty concise, but it's been so influential, a real staple for anyone needing that immediate boost. And we've really analyzed its structure, its claims, all the psychological levers it pulls. And we should be clear right up front. This is not some technical guide. It's not filled with, neuroscience charts or complex academic frameworks. The material itself describes it as a series of short, impactful reflections. They're specifically designed to restore confidence and hope. So yeah, you could call it a pep talk in a book. But our mission today is to go beyond just the pep talk. We want to figure out what key levers this book pulls to turn that fleeting motivation into something sustained, something unyielding for you, the learner.
That's the critical distinction, isn't it?
Yeah.
Our mission here is all about utility. It's about how you can use this. We're here to extract the most vital nuggets of wisdom on resilience and really forge them into a kind of operating manual for overcoming discouragement. This book is popular for a reason. It works for a lot of people.
Yeah.
And we need to understand why it works. We're looking for those simple, actionable steps that bridge the gap between thinking about quitting and actually choosing to push through.
Okay, let's unpack this then. Let's start with the book's central message because it's profound, but it's also immediately challenging. Mason states pretty categorically that most people quit too soon. And then there's the crucial addition. They often quit just before success.
Right, that's the part that stings.
It's almost terrifying, isn't it? When you read that, the immediate implication is success always just around the corner if we wait one more moment? Doesn't that kind of statement that you quit just before success put this almost unbearable, superstitious pressure on every single hard moment? How does Mason address the person who hears that and then becomes too paralyzed to do anything because they believe if they fail now, they must have quit at the absolute worst second?
That is a very, very important challenge.
Yeah.
And it gets right to the heart of what the book's trying to do. See, Mason isn't really talking about literal clock-on-the-wall timing. He's challenging our perception of timing. When we really analyze this statement, it's less about a literal finish line that's just out of sight and much more about the psychological timing of the test itself. The book's core analysis, it actually refers to this exact scenario. It calls it delayed success being a key source of failure.
Delayed success.
Exactly. Think about it. If success came quickly, if it were linear, you start a new skill and you master it in a week,
You wouldn't need this book.
you wouldn't need perseverance at all. Persistence is tested precisely during that gap. That period where you're putting in maximum effort, but you're getting minimum observable results, that gap, that is the psychological crucible.
That's the dry middle period, the slog.
Exactly. The slog. Imagine a content creator. They put out 50 videos. They've spent hundreds of hours learning to edit, learning lighting, scripting. They check their metrics every day. 12 subscribers. 50 views per video. By all outside measures, it looks like a complete failure. The effort to reward ratio is it's totally collapsed.
Right, and that's where most people would stop.
That's exactly where they stop. They rationalize it, right? They say the idea was flawed or the market's too saturated, or maybe they just don't have the talent. Mason's message is that failure isn't the mission ending because of some external force. Failure is abandoning the mission right there in that crucial dry middle period, often before the compounding effects of those first 50 attempts can finally kick in. So that pressure he applies, it's intentional. It forces you to completely reevaluate your timeline and, more importantly, your expectation that things should be linear.
So his focus is really on redefining the struggle itself. He's emphasizing that our inner strength is so much greater than we realize, and that challenges, these roadblocks, they aren't definitive signs of failure. They're actually necessary opportunities for growth. It sounds like the perfect antidote to the instant gratification trap we all live in now.
Oh, it absolutely is. And this is where he just flips the script. See, if you structure your belief system to think that your strength only exists when things are easy,
then any resistance is proof that you're weak.
right? The moment you hit resistance, it just confirms your weakness and you stop. Mason reframes that resistance. He argues that resistance is not an impediment to strength. It's the furnace that forges the strength you already have but just haven't accessed yet. The challenges aren't flaws in your plan, they're essential features of the growth process itself. You are required to struggle to reveal that hidden capacity.
Okay, so if we're going to build a strategy for not quitting, we have to start by diagnosing the enemy.
You have to. We must first deeply diagnose the internal enemies, because Mason's advice is purely, well, it's a counteroffensive. He's very clear on identifying the primary psychological hurdles that stop people. If we synthesize the book's summary, we can isolate these barriers for quick clarity for anyone listening. And the list of barriers, on the surface, it's pretty classic stuff. But Mason has this really emotionally resonant, accessible way of talking about them. The first one is the fear of failure. But we need to move beyond thinking of failure as just an event, like getting a bad grade or losing a sale. Mason treats failure as a paralyzing mental state.
That's a powerful distinction. Failure isn't the thing that happened in the past. It's the shadow that event casts forward that stops you from acting again. It's catastrophic thinking, isn't it?
Precisely. That's the perfect term for it. Catastrophic thinking just amplifies that fear.
Yeah.
Our brains, they love to leap from I failed at this one project to I will always fail, therefore I am a failure and everyone is going to know it.
Right, the fear of judgment.
It's the judgment, the perceived finality of it, and the damage to your self-image. All of that causes hesitation. And that hesitation, that paralysis, is often way more damaging to your long-term success than the initial failure ever was.
Yeah.
Mason's whole goal is to disarm that sense of finality by suggesting failure is just temporary data. It's just information.
Which flows right into the second internal saboteur he talks about, self-doubt. And this isn't just, feeling a little shy. This is that persistent internal narrative that actively stops you. It's that voice saying, even if you keep going, you're not capable of finishing. You just don't have what it takes.
And he targets this narrative directly because it's probably the most common internal sabotage mechanism there is. Self-doubt functions as a kind of preventative quitting mechanism.
A preventative, like it's trying to protect you.
Yes, exactly. It tells you to quit before you even really try, which in a twisted way protects you from the possibility of that big, painful failure we just talked about. But in doing so, it completely locks you out of any possibility of success. So Mason's reflections, they're all aimed at interrupting that negative loop, providing these immediate counter-narratives that focus on effort and on commitment, rather than some kind of innate fixed ability.
And then we hit the absolute core of the quitting process, discouragement and loss of motivation. And we should be really precise here. We need to differentiate these from just physical exhaustion. If I'm physically exhausted, my body says, I need a rest. Simple. But if I'm discouraged, my mind is saying something totally different. It's saying, this isn't worth it. The outcome I want isn't going to happen. So why are these mental states so often the real breaking point? Why do they eclipse just being physically tired?
Because discouragement attacks the fundamental structure of effort. It attacks the why. Physical exhaustion attacks the how. And you can solve the how problem with a nap or a better process or more coffee.
But if your why is gone...
If your why is gone, if you truly believe the effort is futile, if that connection between what you're doing and the reward you expect is just evaporated, your body will not move, even if it's perfectly rested. Discouragement signals a disconnect. It's like a broken contract with your own future. And this psychological collapse, it links directly back to our opening point, delayed success. When the rewards are delayed far, far past your expected timeline, the perceived value of the effort you're putting in right now just plummets. And that leads straight to discouragement. So persistence is tested most severely when the results are not immediate. When you are in the absolute deepest part of that dry middle period we described, Mason focuses on mindset and, importantly, faith to bridge that belief gap until the visible results finally show up.
Okay, so the analysis of the book makes it very clear that Mason's approach is fundamentally action-oriented and emotionally uplifting. He's aiming to combat these specific psychological barriers head-on. It seems like it's less about a deep analytical dive into the root cause of your fear and more about creating the immediate mental momentum you need to push through this present moment of crisis.
That's a crucial observation about the book's utility.
Yeah.
Absolutely. Mason knows that someone who's discouraged or paralyzed by fear, they don't need a complex psychological treatise.
No, they need hope.
They need hope, and they need a simple, immediate path forward. So the book focuses entirely on the here and now of decision-making. It's not asking you to solve the complex historical roots of your self-doubt from childhood. It's just asking you to choose to take one small step today.
Now, here's where the analysis gets really fascinating for me. What's fascinating here is how Mason achieves this emotional uplift. He does it by blending his sources. The book uniquely combines motivational psychology with spiritual wisdom.
This synthesis is highly intentional, and it's a huge part of the book's wide appeal. By weaving together the pragmatism of motivational psychology, things like goal setting, reframing your thoughts with spiritual wisdom, which addresses meaning, ultimate purpose, and faith in an unseen future. Well, it just speaks to a much, much broader audience. It speaks to the person who reads self-help for practical confidence boosts, and it speaks to the person who needs a deeper, more existential meaning attached to why they should persevere.
Can you give an example of the difference?
Sure. Think about it like this. Motivational psychology might tell you, you must endure this difficult project because the reward, the promotion, the money is great.
Okay, very pragmatic.
Very. But spiritual wisdom might tell you, you must endure this difficult project because the process itself is refining you. It's building your character, regardless of the immediate reward. Combining them gives you a kind of dual defense against quitting. If that pragmatic reward fails to show up quickly,
The underlying sense of meaning keeps the engine running.
exactly, it's a much more robust system.
And the summary we looked at highlights how the book uses practical wisdom and real-life examples to deliver its message. That seems critical for grounding these inspirational claims, making them feel relatable rather than just theoretical. It's not just abstract philosophy, it's tied to tangible human experience. He uses historical figures, modern anecdotes, even scriptural references.
Exactly. I mean, if you just tell someone they have to endure, that's just a vague command. It doesn't have much power. But if you ground that concept in a structure of faith or common morality or even just historical proof that other people have overcome far worse, it provides the necessary fuel. The real-life examples serve as accessible proof that the struggle is navigable and, crucially, that it's normal. It validates your struggle while at the same time insisting that you move forward.
Okay, let's pivot for a second to a more critical look at the book's structural strengths and limitations. I think this distinction is vital for applying the knowledge effectively. If you pick up this book expecting, a detailed randomized control trial on goal setting, you're going to be disappointed.
Very disappointing.
But if you're in a deep slump and you just need a daily source of fuel to get you out of bed, you'll probably find it incredibly useful.
That distinction is paramount for the learner. Let's start with the strengths. The analysis points out the obvious. The language is simple, clear, very easy to read. And this strategic minimalism is completely intentional. The chapters are short, often just a few paragraphs. This makes it ideal for daily motivation. It suggests the book is a restorative tool, something meant to be consumed incrementally. It builds a really strong emotional connection very quickly, and its focus is entirely on encouraging that long-term perseverance. It's fundamentally about moving beyond the mindset of instant gratification.
And those strengths clearly speak to our user, the learner. Someone who needs knowledge quickly, but also needs an escape from just being overwhelmed with information. A short daily chapter is a manageable input. It's a low-friction entry point when your cognitive resources are already being taxed by discouragement.
But we have to acknowledge the limitations, too. The sources critically note that the book is less scientific. It's not data-driven. It relies very heavily on analogy and assertion rather than, say, empirical evidence.
And it can be repetitive.
Yes, and it's also noted as being repetitive, especially for advanced self-help readers. But that's almost inevitable, given the format. I mean, if your core message is don't quit, and your format is short daily reflections, some repetition is almost required for the message to sink in and act as reinforcement. The goal isn't intellectual novelty. It's behavioral modification through consistent encouragement.
You know, that structural repetition is actually an advantage for the target audience. It means that the core principles are being drilled in, especially when the reader is feeling mentally fragile.
Absolutely. So the overall synthesis provided in our source material is really the most important takeaway here. The book works best as a motivational companion, not a technical guide. It is there to hold your hand and cheer you on, to address your will, not to provide a deep research strategy for how to pivot your business model or learn a new statistical software. It addresses your emotional state and the decision to continue, and leaves the technical details to other sources.
Okay, so now we get to the core of the wisdom. The 6 major principles Mason delivers to foster this kind of unyielding growth. We're going to spend a good amount of time unpacking each of these, starting with lesson 1, which I find the most provocative and honestly the most necessary in our modern world. And that is, persistence beats talent. Success belongs to those who refuse to quit, not necessarily the most talented. Here's where it gets really interesting for me. In a world that is obsessed with finding innate skill, the perfect genetic advantage, the natural, this statement champions sheer effort and grit above all else. So how does effort and just the sheer refusal to stop actually overcome an intrinsic skill deficit over the long run? That feels almost anti-intuitive.
It is counterintuitive, but only if you measure success in the short term. Mason is playing the long game here. In that statement, it's a profound shift in how we assign value. Talent is, by its very definition, kind of static, or at least slow changing. It's a starting point. Persistence, on the other hand, is dynamic. It is a constantly compounding advantage.
Compounding, I like that.
Let's imagine two people. They both start learning a new programming language, or maybe a musical instrument. Person A is highly talented, a total natural, but they lack discipline. They can master the first 20% with almost no effort. It just clicks. But when they hit that complex, repetitive, difficult zone, the next 60%, they quit. Because the effort required suddenly feels disproportionate to their innate gift. They're not used to trying.
They rely on the gift until the gift is no longer enough.
Exactly. Now take person B, the average plodder, lacks the initial flash, but possesses relentless persistence, unbelievable discipline. They struggle with that first 20%. They have to show up every single day, reread the manuals, fail repeatedly, sound terrible on the instrument. But by the time they hit that complex middle zone, they've already built the habit of showing up. They've already accepted that mastery is a result of repetition, not some divine revelation.
They've built the muscle for the slog.
They built the muscle. So over 5 years, the talented quitter is still sitting there with 20% mastery, feeling frustrated that it's not easy anymore. The persistent person, because they've built that muscle of consistency and discipline, which the book heavily encourages, they sail right past them. They hit 80, 90% mastery. Their effort today is an investment in their future competence, while the talented person's reliance on their gift just eventually plateaued. It's a difference between a natural gift, which is just a starting point, and a learned discipline, which is a sustained compounding trajectory. That's the core power of this first lesson.
That makes lesson 2 absolutely critical then, because if you are that average plodder putting in consistent effort, you're going to rack up a lot more mistakes than the naturally talented person did at the beginning. So we transition perfectly to lesson 2. Failure is feedback. This is that necessary reframing of mistakes. Mason positions mistakes as lessons, and specifically not as life sentences.
Yes. And when you view a mistake as just feedback, you immediately remove the finality and all the shame that comes with it. If a failure is treated like a life sentence, you stomp. You assume the task is impossible for you, and you suffer this catastrophic blow to your self-image. But if a failure is just data, it's just information telling you, okay, that specific approach A didn't work, time to try approach B. The emotional cost is just drastically lowered.
But I have to push back a little here. Feedback often hurts a lot. Isn't there a risk that by just calling everything a lesson, we trivialize genuine detrimental setbacks? I mean, does the book offer any guidance on how to process the grief or the real-world consequence, like a financial loss or public criticism of a major failure, before you just leap to reframing it as a lesson?
That's a very fair critical assessment. And Mason's approach, because it's a motivational companion, it does tend to gloss over the deep processing of grief in favor of immediate action. I'll grant you that. However, the mechanism he provides, the reframing, is the emotional exit ramp. He's essentially suggesting that the duration of the grief is a choice. You're allowed to feel the pain, but you're not allowed to let the pain define the entire mission.
So you extract the lesson quickly.
You extract the operational insight immediately. For instance, if an entrepreneur launches a product and it fails spectacularly, the failure itself is painful, of course. But the lesson that the market wasn't ready or the marketing copy was all wrong, that lesson is invaluable. By insisting on extracting that lesson right away, the entrepreneur justifies the effort and reframes the event. It becomes a costly but necessary research expense rather than a definitive personal condemnation. This shift allows for continuous iteration. It radically alters the emotional cost of setbacks, moving you from shame to strategic intelligence.
Which, in turn, lowers the barrier to entry for trying new things. That's vital for any learner. If the penalty for failure is a valuable lesson rather than a definitive condemnation, you'll be much more likely to take calculated risks and explore unfamiliar territory, which is essential for any kind of growth.
Absolutely. And this brings us right to lesson 3. Your strength is hidden until tested. This speaks directly to the nature of resilience as a kind of hidden asset. Hard times aren't just obstacles you have to endure. The book suggests they actively reveal abilities you didn't even know you possessed. The struggle becomes a positive necessity.
So the struggle isn't a deviation from the path. The struggle is the path. It's the paradox of pressure.
Indeed. The analysis of the book examines this mechanism of testing. Pressure forces adaptation and growth. It's the psychological equivalent of weight training. I mean, if you only lift weights that feel easy and comfortable, your muscles won't grow. It's impossible. Similarly, if your mental and emotional resilience is never challenged, it just remains dormant. It's an unaccessed resource.
Okay, so a real crisis hits.
Right, you face a genuine crisis, a sudden financial setback, a brutal project deadline where the stakes are high, or just that deep discouragement that threatens your identity. In that moment, you are forced to find creative solutions. You're forced to allocate mental energy in ways you never needed to before. You become more resourceful, more focused, and you learn very quickly that some boundaries you thought were rigid are actually pretty pliable when you're under pressure.
That forced adaptation is where the growth happens. The person listening goes from thinking, I can't handle this, to looking back and realizing, wait a minute, I did handle that, which means I am fundamentally stronger than I believed I was yesterday.
And by linking this to the idea that your inner strength is greater than you realize, Mason turns the crisis moment into a moment of self-discovery. He empowers you by saying, this crisis is not a sign of your doom. It is proof of your capacity. You are currently discovering exactly how strong you are. That narrative allows you to engage with difficulty with a sense of curiosity and purpose, rather than just dread.
That concept of pressure revealing strength is massive. But when you're facing a huge project or a vast field of information, the strength you need most is often just the strength to get started. Which brings us neatly to the next lesson, the great anti-overwhelm strategy. Lesson 4, small steps matter. The key message here is that progress, even excruciatingly slow progress, is still success.
This is pure, essential, practical wisdom, especially for the learner persona who's struggling with a large project or just information overload. The sheer scale of a task, learning everything required to pass a huge certification or writing a 200,000-word novel is often what triggers the paralysis and discouragement. Your amygdala, sensing this massive, threatening task, essentially hijacks your system. It triggers a freeze response because the task just feels insurmountable.
Oh, we've all been there. Staring at a to-do list so big that you just choose to watch TV instead.
Exactly. And Mason breaks this paralysis by focusing entirely on the immediate, tiny slice of action. You don't have to finish the marathon today. You just have to take the first step, and then the next one, and then you document that you took the step. This is about establishing what behavioral scientists call mastery experiences.
Mastery experiences.
Yeah, small, successful completions that build confidence in your ability to execute, not necessarily in the final result. The practical application for you as a learner is profound. You fuel your long-term motivation by celebrating small daily wins. If you commit to reading 10 pages of a complex report and you do it, that's a success for that day. Full stop. If you commit to 1 hour of focused, distraction-free work, that's a success. These small, low-friction wins accumulate trust in your own ability to follow through, and they provide that necessary emotional reinforcement until the larger, delayed successes finally arrive. It systematically combats the feeling of futility by making your daily effort feel valuable in and of itself.
I think this is where the short chapter format of the book itself is just brilliantly deployed. It's practicing what it preaches. You're instructed to consume one small, digestible lesson a day. That small step of daily consumption leads to greater cumulative knowledge and internal reinforcement. It's teaching the reader how to approach all of life's major challenges.
Precisely. Which brings us to lesson 5. Mindset shapes outcomes. This is the detailed analysis of the mental component. Mason is emphatic on this point. What you believe about yourself determines how far you go. Full stop. He places enormous importance on not just, positive thinking, but on cognitive discipline. The discipline to shape that belief system. If your internal self-talk is rooted in pessimism, this won't work, I'm not good enough, I'm doomed to fail, you will unconsciously sabotage your own efforts. You'll prove your self-doubt correct.
It becomes a self-fulfilling prophecy.
A total self-fulfilling prophecy. You stop looking for solutions, you withdraw effort, and then, you fail. And you say, see, I told you so.
But conversely, the mindset rooted in optimism and self-efficacy, the belief that you can succeed, that allows you to interpret obstacles as temporary setbacks that just require a strategy change, not as permanent walls indicating you're inherently inadequate.
It's the difference between saying, this challenge is impossible, and saying, I haven't found the right solution yet.
That one word.
That one word, yet. is the key driver of all perseverance. Mason instructs you to develop the discipline to monitor and filter your internal dialogue, actively replacing those destructive narratives with proactive ones. It connects right back to combating self-doubt from Section 1. Combating self-doubt starts not with achieving some big external success, but with cultivating the belief in the possibility of success. The mindset is the engine. The discipline is the steering wheel. These lessons are all highly interdependent. To persist, Lesson 1, you need to believe in the eventual outcome, Lesson 5. And to do that, you must be willing to accept feedback from your failures, Lesson 2. Mason is essentially building a systemic approach to mental toughness where your belief feeds your action, which in turn feeds your resilience.
And finally, we arrive at the ultimate summation of agency. This is the point where all these different threads converge. Lesson 6. Giving up is a choice. So is continuing. This is the final takeaway on personal responsibility. Every setback doesn't define you. It merely offers you two explicit, conscious options. You can quit or you can grow.
This is probably the most empowering message of the whole book because it shifts the entire locus of control inward. And it raises an important question. How does making persistence a conscious choice empower you, rather than just having you rely on fickle motivation or chance? The distinction is vital. Motivation is an emotion. A choice is an act of will.
And emotions are unstable.
Completely. They're highly subject to external circumstances. If you have a bad day, your motivation just collapses. It's gone. By reframing persistence as a conscious, deliberate choice, you anchor your actions to your deeply held goals, not to your temporary feelings.
You're essentially creating a kind of non-negotiable contract with your future self.
Precisely. You are not waiting for inspiration to strike. You are choosing to act because you know your long-term goals require it. It empowers you because it strips away that common excuse of, oh, I just didn't feel motivated today. The book emphasizes that you don't need to feel strong to choose to continue. You need to choose to continue in order to become strong, which circles all the way back to Lesson 3. The choice is what initiates the process of strength building. When you are discouraged, when you feel weak, and you choose to continue anyway, that single act is the definitive proof that you are, in fact, stronger than you think.
Okay, let's move into application now. We've unpacked the mechanisms, but now we have to analyze who this powerful, direct message resonates with most effectively, because understanding the target audience helps us understand the true utility and the value of this book's very specific style.
I think we all recognize that feeling, that dry middle period you mentioned. You've put in 100 hours of effort, and you've got 2 views on your video, or your first 2 prototypes failed, or your complex research paper was just rejected.
Yeah. That psychological gap requires serious, intentional fuel, and that's where a book like this steps in.
It's particularly powerful for any demographic that's experiencing high variance and delayed rewards. So take students facing pressure or failure in academics. They operate in a high-stakes, high-feedback environment. Every test, every paper, every grade. It's all feedback. They need that foundational message that a failure is feedback, not a life sentence.
You can imagine a grad student.
Oh, a graduate student grinding through a thesis is the perfect example. The project is massive, right? So that's Lesson 4, small steps. The results are incredibly delayed, so that's the delayed success problem. And the criticism from their advisor is intense, so that's failure is feedback. Mason's message gives them that daily moral resource to just keep showing up at the library even when the data isn't cooperating. It transforms this overwhelming journey into a series of manageable, non-negotiable, small steps.
And crucially, entrepreneurs and creators, especially content creators and YouTubers, their reward cycles are notoriously brutal. They deal with insane variance, a viral hit one day, total silence, the next delayed rewards, and frequent, sometimes very harsh, public criticism.
That's right.
That dry period where no one is watching, no one is buying, and all that effort feels completely wasted, that's exactly where Mason's message is most vital.
To give a specific application, an entrepreneur trying to scale their business applies Lesson 4, small steps, to break down their quarterly goals into weekly metrics. This allows them to celebrate the operational wins like making 50 cold calls, even if the major financial success, the delayed success, hasn't materialized yet.
And they use Lesson 2.
They use Lesson 2 to pivot quickly when a marketing campaign flops. They reframe the flop as useful data on customer preference rather than a personal failure that crushes their spirit.
And then, of course, there's the massive general category.
The massive category of anyone struggling with a motivation, anxiety, or self-doubt, which, let's be honest, is all of us at some point. This covers professional slumps, personal transitions, health challenges, or just the long, slow, boring process of building a good habit. The universal struggle is that internal decision to keep going when all the external evidence suggests you should stop. The core utility here is basically psychological first aid.
So why is this specific book style, these short, impactful reads, so ideal for these high-pressure, high-burnout demographics? If the advice is repetitive, why doesn't that become tiresome?
Because burnout often correlates with severe mental fatigue. You just have a lack of available cognitive resources. When you are deeply discouraged or burned out, you lack the energy for a 400-page academic text on the neurobiology of resilience. You just can't do it.
You need something simple.
You need an injection of hope, and you need it now without a massive cognitive investment. Mason's format is highly accessible, it's direct, it's restorative. It provides the necessary emotional and mental bandwidth to just take that next small step. The repetition ensures that the core message is internalized, even when you're feeling mentally fragile. It functions like a daily vitamin for your will.
So let's review the general reader sentiment. It averages about 4 out of 5 stars across major platforms. What does that really tell us about the book's success and how people are using it?
The positive sentiment, it's overwhelmingly described in the source material with words like uplifting, encouraging tone, and faith-strengthening. It's frequently cited as a tool that genuinely helped people during hard personal and professional phases. This clearly reinforces that idea that the book functions brilliantly as that motivational companion we identified. It's a highly effective emotional tool. Right, but we have to integrate the critical feedback too. And that feedback is, the ideas are familiar. They're not deeply analytical. This juxtaposition is the key to understanding the book's value proposition in the marketplace of ideas. So what's the synthesis? The synthesis is clear. While the ideas may not be new, concepts like persistence over talent have been around since antiquity, the delivery and the emotional connection are highly effective for people who need daily, accessible inspiration, not new psychological theory. The value isn't an intellectual novelty, it's an emotional execution. It's in the timely accessibility and that reliable, constant voice of encouragement. People rate it highly, not because it revolutionized their thinking, but because it helped them change their behavior when they needed it most. It is effective, despite its lack of academic depth, because its goal is not to inform the intellect, but to fuel the will.
That explains the high rating perfectly. People aren't rating it as some groundbreaking piece of research. They're rating it as a highly effective, low-friction tool for getting through a tough week, a rough quarter, or just a dark period in their personal life. And ending with the stylistic quote provided in our source material, Mason really encapsulates his entire mission in a single sentence. You may feel weak today, but strength grows when you refuse to stop.
That quote is masterful because it executes the book's entire strategy perfectly in just a few words. First, it acknowledges the present difficulty. You may feel weak today. That validates your current painful state.
Which is so important.
It's critical. But then it immediately pairs that validation with a demand for future action. But strength grows when you refuse to stop. It links the active choice from Lesson 6 directly to the discovery of hidden strength from Lesson 3. It's the whole book's instruction manual condensed, linking your present pain to a future guaranteed payoff if you simply commit to the choice of continuation.
So what does this all mean for you, the learner, taking this wisdom into your next big project or your next challenge?
I think the final synthesis is clear. Mason's work emphatically stresses that your internal resources, your persistence, your discipline, your mindset, these are the fundamental differentiating factors for success, often far more so than whatever initial skill or talent you start with.
And this knowledge is crucial because it focuses entirely on the things that you can actually control. You can't control whether you're naturally gifted at something, but you can always control your effort. And persistence isn't just about surviving the difficult patch. It is the essential process that reveals your previously unknown strength. If you can internalize the belief that your strength is hidden until it's tested, then the very act of continuing transformed you, regardless of the immediate tangible result. So as we close out this deep dive, let's leave you with a final provocative thought to mull over. Since Mason emphasizes that people quit just before success, that psychological point of imminent surrender is your greatest vulnerability. So the question for you is, how can you formalize your commitment to effort? Formalize it. How so?
Well, stop tracking just the results, the money, the views, the grades. Start tracking the inputs.
Yeah.
Track the endurance. What is the smallest, most ridiculous benchmark of effort you can commit to for the next 7 days, regardless of the results? It could be 15 minutes of deep work. It could be one honest, small step on that project you've been avoiding. How do you formalize that tiny win so that when discouragement inevitably hits, you can point to the data, to your effort log, your list of completed small steps, and say, I chose to continue yesterday, and I will choose to continue today. That intentional scaffolding,
Yeah.
that is the practical application of this book's powerful wisdom.
That's a powerful challenge. The structure of perseverance needs to be built into your routine long before the storm actually hits. Thank you for diving deep into the science of resilience with us today. Now go use that inner strength.